This is TWiT. All right, let's talk about, what is it, WinGet? Is that what we're going to call it?
WinGet, AppGet.
AppGet, WinGet.
Yeah, so Mary Jo and I received an email from the author of AppGet to provide some additional information, and
we talked about this last week and
some clarity.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's pretty much a clone what Microsoft's offering with WinGet.
So first, we should say he heard us talking about this on Windows Weekly, and he said he is a huge fan of the show.
Yay.
And he has been since day one.
Yay,
so he was
Keivan,
excited.
The most important thing is he provided the pronunciation of his name.
Please.
Which he says Mary Jo pronounced perfectly last week. Keivan Beigi.
Keivan Beigi.
Keivan Beigi.
I would have not pronounced it that way, so I'm glad I asked. But yeah, so I will say, you know, so just as kind of a backgrounder, you know, issues like this, I write about this and I express a certain amount of outrage over what happened to him. And there are a lot of misunderstandings over what I'm upset about, and not that I matter, but, you know, because on my site I write about it, you know, that's what I hear back. People say, oh, Paul, it's an open source license. It's fine. Microsoft didn't do anything wrong, blah, 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 whatever. My issue was more in the way they treated this person, right? That I felt it was unethical, and that for a corporation the size of Microsoft to not do the right thing with regards to an individual, I found to be rather bizarre. Now, his issues are actually slightly different. He was a little concerned that they weren't, he wasn't credited at all in the original announcement, despite the, you know, months of time they spent communicating and so forth. But some of this information that he did provide, I think, is really, really interesting. And actually, one of the points that he makes addresses something that you brought up, Leo, last week, which was his decision to use the Apache license, right? Mm-hmm. Which he says was deliberate, and he has his reasons for that. But you know, he makes a good point. You know, because they didn't copy the code, his choice of license doesn't matter. You know, they didn't copy the code, so
we didn't know that. We didn't know how much of his code was in their code. So that's
the licensing just doesn't
irrelevant.
apply.
Yeah, unless you fork the project, you don't have to worry about the license.
Yeah. But also, he expresses something in here that is really interesting to me. I just mentioned how, you know, on my own site, I'm sure Mary Jo has the same experience on hers. You get this kind of pushback from people who are like, I don't see why you're making a big deal out of this. I don't think Microsoft did anything wrong. This guy is obviously subjected to this as well. I thought that the thing that he wrote was very even-handed and fair, and it wasn't like he was ranting or, you know, acting all upset about it or whatever. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, he feels the need to express, like, contrary to how some people feel, he's clearly gotten this feedback. I don't claim to have invented package managers. I mean, it's awful that he has to say something like that. I mean, who just, I know. I just, the world is so terrible. And it's sad that someone who creates something like this, and we've seen that, you know, Mehdi, same thing. Mehdi made his GUI front end for WinGet, and people are like, oh, this doesn't do this. And it's like, dude, they announced something on Tuesday and he released it on Friday. Could we just applaud this? Like, it's a, you know, it's kind of, I don't understand what the complaining is about. But anyway, he does feel that it was unfair to drag him along for a year and then ignore him for 6 months and release a product based on his ideas as their own. He doesn't feel that it was theft or license violation, just that it wasn't fair. And yeah, that's 100%. That's that is my that was my complaint as well. Yeah. And he says that Microsoft never actually even mentioned AppGet or any other package managers the inspiration for WinGet. And if they had, he probably never would have said a thing. You know, if they had just mentioned that that's where this came from. And then what they did instead was mention a list of package managers, and AppGet was one of them, as if, you know, oh, there are these other things out in the world. We never really even looked at them. You know, they're not important because we have one now. So, I don't know. Is there anything else in here that sticks out to you, Mary Jo?
Yeah. Well, I asked during the show last week about how much did he really even care about joining Microsoft. Yeah. So he addressed that in his note to us. He said, just them saying we couldn't come to terms, I objected to, because I heard from them. 6 months went by. I heard nothing. And they were, it sounds like they were clear that if they had come to terms, he could have stayed in Vancouver, Canada, and worked in the Microsoft office there. And he's just more perplexed about what was the radio silence there. Like, hey, I talked to you about a job, and it seemed like things were going well, and then you just didn't talk to me at all for 6 months. So I think that's also an interesting point. Then today I asked him, now that we're on a first name basis.
Now that we can pronounce each other's names.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I asked him, what else did I ask him here? Let me see.
Oh, did you ask him if he would? Oh, good. I'm sorry.
No, I'm trying to find what I asked him here. Yeah. Oh, I said, what else did you and Andrew, the manager from Microsoft, talk about? And he said, I've given them a couple suggestions about things that Microsoft could do to regain some open source goodwill, and we're still talking about that. So that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, because there was a mention in that post that Andrew had made about them communicating, and hopefully they would have something to say more about that soon.
Something more to say, yeah. So that's good. Yeah. I think they're doing Microsoft's doing the right thing now, but it's too bad it had to come to it this way. But yeah.
Right. So it's cool that this guy happens to be a fan of the show. That's neat. And I feel like the important thing for me is that everyone lands on the right side of history here. I mean, my outrage was about Microsoft's treatment of him. Yeah. And the other stuff is whatever. I mean, there's a conversation we had around all this stuff. But, yeah. It's interesting to me. I don't mean to say I'm glad he is outraged at the same thing, but I mean, I'm glad we weren't missing the point, because a lot of people absolutely have. And it bothers me, but I'm not surprised that he's probably gotten a lot of negative feedback from people who think he's some kind of a attention hound or whatever
Complainer.
It is. That's crazy. Yeah. It's just crazy.
It's funny because this happens all the time in the Macintosh world. It's super common. There's even a term for it. There was being Sherlocked. There was a wonderful search program for the Macintosh called Sherlock, and when Spotlight was announced, oh my God, they basically put it out of business. You've been Sherlocked, and it happens every year when Apple announces its new stuff. And it's pretty much the same as happened here. They copy an idea. The idea is so good, they say, let's put that in the operating system, that kind of thing.
Without any recognition.
They never say.
Someone else did. It's the worst.
Yeah.
Never do it.
Because
that's really bad.
That's very Sinofsky-like. Everything was invented here.
I was sitting with a good friend, Ray Slakinski, who wrote one of the early podcast applications when Apple announced, we're going to put podcasts on iTunes, and he just slumped. It's like,
he's like gouges eyes.
There goes all my sales.
I guess I'm getting a divorce. Thanks, Apple.
But that happens. And this is, when you're a little fish and you're swimming in a pond with a lot of really big fish with sharp teeth, you can't be surprised if you occasionally get swallowed whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we got the last laugh on Apple because now, thanks to PowerToys, we have the that run search feature. I forget what it's called, and where you hit, command space or whatever it is on the Mac, and now we have PowerToys Run, where we hit Alt space and it brings up the search bar in the middle of the screen. Looks exactly like it, and I hope to God that they sue Microsoft over that, because I'm pretty sure that actually that's the successor to Sherlock, isn't it? Technically, right? Because you use it to find apps to run. Yeah, I can't remember what the features, but
I think it's just like searching your hard drive. It's index, like the Windows index.
Yeah. Okay, it's a good feature.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot to be said for remember Microsoft got in trouble with the DOJ for putting a browser in Windows. There's a lot to be said for putting functionality into the operating system if it's really that useful.
Oh. Bill Gates has pages and pages of testimony attesting to that exact claim.
I would defend putting a browser in an operating system. That's pretty obviously.
I think the issue
I wouldn't have originally, but at the time I felt like that was weird. It was bad.
Today it is a baseline for an operating system.
Yeah.
Although I guess on the other hand, today, because there are such great third-party browsers, Chrome, Firefox, whatever, you kind of almost don't need it in the operating system anymore. But today, no one would complain because whatever
everybody does
Raspberry OS has some stupid little browser in it. Nobody cares.
No.
Things change.
No, so that's a good sequel on Mr. AppGet.
It's a nice follow-up. I don't know. I still feel like they could do more for this guy, but.
Well, they did.
It sounds like they're still talking.
Yeah, they're going to give him credit. Yeah,
they did. If you go to the GitHub site now, he's listed as in the README or somewhere. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
You have a little picture of him in the about box with a candle.
That's one thing we
then
didn't know.
Then it says, hire this guy.
We didn't know how much of his code they had reused. And since they reused none, then, it is kind of moot.
I think this came up, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I think didn't he write his in C# and they did theirs in C++?
Yes, it was a different language.
Which is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, he used Microsoft's language.
Yeah. Microsoft
they declined to. They decided to use Bjorn Stustrup's language.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I had a guy call on the radio show and say, you shouldn't really knock Delphi. I still write a lot of code in it.
Yeah, you know what? You really should knock Delphi. It's okay.
I said, well,
He's the author of the Bible.
I happen to have the Delphi 3 Super Bible right in front of me.
Yeah.
If
he says it.
But speaking seriously, like Delphi at the time was fantastic, and you had to kind of look at what was out in the world. Like the Microsoft Foundation classes for C++ were terrible. What Borland did was fantastic, but the guy that did that came to Microsoft and made .NET and made C# and
so there you go,
and made TypeScript. C# is the one. Is the place to be. Yeah. So I get it, but it kept improving. It just did it with a different language.
Well, thank you, Keivan, for giving us an update. We appreciate it. And for listening. It's good to know. Good to know. Mr. AppGet listens to the show. Another title. Amazon. By the way, if I was going to mention this when he said, well, but they use my code, they just copy the idea. That's kind of the whole basis for the Supreme Court case that Oracle is suing Google over.
That's right.
Oh,
they didn't steal their code. They copied their API. And apparently the lower courts held you can copyright an API.
Yeah, because, Leo, an API is like a painting. Why don't you understand that?
That should be obvious. Anyone should know. Van Gogh created some of the greatest APIs in history.
That's exactly right. Yeah.